Video game escapism, that's a pretty cool thing. It's nice to kick back and play one of your favorite games, a new title you've been putting off, or really anything else. Sometimes games can present some fairly weird, experimental takes on different genres or create a generally relaxing environment. It's odd how I feel like weird games and relaxing games can sometimes go hand in hand. Some may not be inherently weird to you, but they just happen to give off that vibe for me. I've been trying to delve into more different kinds of games recently, so I think it'd be fun to take a look at just a few of them for this video. I've had my eyes on a lot of games, but one that got me especially curious was Hypnagogia Boundless Dreams. In particular, the visuals were really striking, and the game itself reminded me a bit of that weird PS1 game, LSD Dream Emulator. I'm sure at least a few of you know what I'm talking about. I figured Hypnagogia would be a similar kind of game, but it's really not at all, but I'll get into that later. So Hypnagogia begins with a cutscene showing us a little rabbit dude walking in this creepy area, then hopping over to this big old crystal before it suddenly shatters, and then this big shadow man kidnaps him, I guess. Afterwards, we wake up in the same spot where we're greeted by Hypno, the guardian of the Dream Nexus, the area we're in. We're informed that the Dream Crystal, which keeps track of all conscious and subconscious thoughts, has shattered and each of its fragments have been spread across multiple dreams, which means it's up to us to explore each dream, find its Dream Crystal fragment, then head off to the next. Hypnagogia is an early access game, but from what I've played, the main story takes a backseat, although I assume it'll become more prominent in the late game, but I'm okay with that honestly because it allows the individual dreams we explore to have their sort of own stories going on with them. Each dream you explore is a self-contained world from the rest, all with their own characters, unique settings, and visuals. Speaking of, I gotta talk about the visuals first. That's gotta be one of the biggest contributing factors to why this game is so oddly relaxing to me. It takes inspiration from Dreamcast and PS1 era visuals, and I really appreciate the little mixture of 3D styles here, because I do think indie games using the PS1 aesthetic are a little bit oversaturated. Not to say that I don't like the style, but I think it's lost a bit of its charm over the years. Don't get me wrong though, I really do love those chunky pixels and that polygonal aesthetic sometimes. In the case of Hypnagogia, its warm color palettes, the compressed look of the textures, and those lovely stylized models all blend together super well, and I gotta say, I dig the style. It's really cool. It's relaxing to me in that it's somewhat nostalgic. Even though I didn't grow up playing Dreamcast titles, it just makes for a nice, comfy experience. And that pretty much applies to the gameplay as well, at least so far. The first two dreams mostly consist of some basic fetch quest type missions. There's nothing too involved in them, which kind of threw me off guard. To be honest with you, I don't know what I was expecting, but I really should have been taking in the scenery some more. I mean, massive props to the dev because each area is very visually distinct. That and the characters you run into, I got a little bit impatient at points and ignored most of the NPCs in the first area, but I do really like the designs for these funny looking characters, especially the mushroom guys. I don't know what it is with some games and them having mushrooms for characters, but I am here for it. I do wish the worlds were expanded a bit further because you don't get to spend a whole lot of time in each dream, but I suppose that does let me appreciate them more for what they are instead of what they could be. My personal favorite dream is definitely the third one, which I believe was the most recently added one. It starts off like the others, but then turns into this weird, like, Zelda-inspired dungeon. It's so freaking weird because I immediately thought of a Zelda game whenever I entered the area, and then I see some C buttons pop up, and it's like, oh dude, this is gonna be sick. And yeah, I can confirm, this is really good. I don't want to say much since the game is short so far, and I think you should experience it for yourself, but the developer did a tremendous job creating that classic Zelda puzzle feeling, but still putting their own creative spin on it. I hope they have more puzzles in the works for future dreams because I love the ones they created for the third dream. Hypnagogia was a much different experience than I expected, but I think it's easily worth a look, and I'm certainly looking forward to whatever content the developer has planned next for the game. Shutter Stroll is the textbook definition of relaxing. There's not a whole lot to it, but what's here is a cozy and relaxing time. The game allows you to travel by boat to randomly generated islands by typing in whatever coordinates you feel like, after which you'll be allowed to explore the island and take whatever pictures you please. I wouldn't expect anything too crazy with the random island generation. They typically only vary in shape, color, or they'll have some different trees or rock formations strewn about, a big old sun or moon, maybe a lake here or there. No animals or people though, just you and the ambience. I don't ever do photography myself in my real life, but I enjoyed my time with this game and just setting up the various shots, because it felt satisfying in a way to find the angle, focus, or filter that was just right for each picture I took. Especially since a lot of the islands I've run into are so aesthetically pleasing. I mean, the game is gorgeous. I've gotten lost countless times in the game just exploring and appreciating the views. For the most part, I feel like the game speaks for itself. I don't feel like there's much more to say about it. Although I do recommend joining their Discord community. It is quiet there, but I like to pop in every so often just to see if anyone has posted a new picture or two, and it's really nice viewing the gallery in there. So we've had a weirdly relaxing game and a straight up relaxing game, so naturally for this next one I've picked out a pretty intense but still really weird game. Have you ever wanted Stardew Valley on crack, except it's not Stardew Valley, you have a gun, and oh my gosh, what is that? Well, if that's not you, then too bad, because Atomic Crops is what you're getting. This game is an intense and fairly difficult bullet hell roguelike where you have to survive each season of the year. The seasons are made up of free days, which all consist of planting and growing crops to harvest, which will net you cashews, basically the game's form of currency that you can use on various temporary upgrades or items like a new gun, a packet of seeds, etc. In the daytime, you're free to plant crops, although you do have to mind the occasional freaking mole. Get out of my garden, you pest! Once it hits nighttime though, that's when you have to worry about protecting your crops from the absolutely bizarre assortment of creatures that want to make your garden into a feast. Now obviously this is where the game is the most stressful, but as you progress through the seasons, more and more enemies of different types start to appear, and suddenly you start getting overwhelmed with slugs and rabbits. Like, it's kind of ridiculous. And needless to say, strategy is everything in this game. I'll get back to the meat of the gameplay in a second, but first I need to mention that at the end of each day, you're taken to a little town where you can buy upgrades to prepare for the next night. Like I just said, strategizing is super important in this game because you're on your own whenever it comes to fighting off the unwanted visitors. It's super important to make sure you're growing enough crops each day, because if you don't harvest enough crops, then you won't earn much money, and you'll be really struggling to buy whatever upgrade you wanted, which will hurt a lot the next day. Believe me, the basic pea shooter you have at the start of the game, yeah, that's barely gonna cover you. You need to buy other weapons occasionally. It's pretty common for roguelikes to be tough, I am well aware, but I was struggling quite a bit with this one. I feel like I'm barely getting enough money to get by each day, which is my main complaint with the game. That, and you have a really limited number of seeds at times, so you may find yourself having to pluck weeds to get 1 or 2 more seeds quite often, though there is a more efficient way of finding more seeds. In the daytime or at night, it doesn't really matter when, you can go scavenging outside of your farm and destroy small enemy bases to earn fertilizer, which you can use to grow crops faster, as well as getting various seeds. Usually it's a bit smarter to go scavenging in the daytime since your crops can't be damaged until the nighttime, so take advantage of that and go exploring. Whatever you can find out there will absolutely help in one way or another. You can also earn some items through the boss fights, which come in at the end of each season, although that does depend upon you actually defeating the boss within the time limit. The game sends out enemies in timed waves normally, so after the last wave of the day ends, the enemies disappear, which is the same case for bosses, which I found a little bit weird. I guess it's the one way that the game is a bit forgiving at least. Oh, and speaking of, at the end of each season, after you've returned to the town, you can go over and talk to the mayor, who will grade you on your crop output for the entire season, and you'll be rewarded depending upon how well you did, so that's another reason to grow as many crops as possible. It's a lot easier said than done to maintain crops in the later seasons though. You have got to have some mad multitasking skills, and let me tell you, I am terrible at multitasking. There is a lot more to the game that I could talk about, but I don't want to ramble on about it for too much longer. Overall, this is a bizarre combo for a game, a roguelike with farming simulator elements, but it's not too shabby honestly. It didn't quite hit right for me the first time I played it, but revisiting it, it's super fun. Of course it helps that I love most roguelikes, but this one really stands out in the crowd because it's got some funky tunes, really nice visuals, and a difficult yet addictive gameplay loop. It's an easy recommendation from me. The last game I wanted to talk about is one from a unique team of indie developers, Sock Pop Games. With the help of their Patreon, they create these weird and experimental games every month, so needless to say, they are a treasure trove for this kind of video. My favorite of their games so far has to be Helionaut though. It's this space exploration game where you head off to the far sides of the galaxy in search of a replacement antenna for your TV after it breaks. Don't let the mundane premise fool you though. This is a decently fleshed out survival-esque game where you're constantly on the grind hunting down materials for upgrading your ship, planet hopping, fighting enemies. It's got a really satisfying gameplay loop. I love the visuals too. Each Sock Pop game uses a similar art style, presumably to save on time that can otherwise be spent on developing new mechanics and ideas, but it makes them really distinct and it's kind of hard to explain. It's sort of close to PS2 type graphics, but it stands out from many other indie games that I've played. I would say this is a relaxing kind of game, but that mainly comes from me just loving the mysterious and grand vibe space has always given off to me. Though it's also in part due to the lack of music. There's a lot of ambient sounds in place of this on the various kinds of planets you land on. I would love to see more minimalistic space exploration games like this because this one just hit a really good chord with me. There's something so cool about embarking into space, seeing all of these different planets around you just ripe for exploration. My only complaint would be that the planets are rather small, so you run into a lot of the same geometry and plant life pretty quickly. It's not a game for everyone though. I can see where this can get repetitive or tedious pretty fast, but for what it is, I really like it. I think a lot of Sock Pop games deserve deluxe versions with more ideas, more content, just anything, and Helionaut is without a doubt deserving of one. But that's gonna be it for me for now. I really want to talk about more of these experimental and odd games, so feel free to let me know of any in the comments. That being said, thanks for watching, consider subscribing, and I'll see you all in the next one. Later!